Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on responsible mining on the ground. I welcome you on behalf of the Responsible Mining Foundation and of ETH Zurich, which is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. My name is Fritz Brugger. I am Director of the Center for Development Cooperation at ETH Zurich. In this webinar, we focus entirely on what happens at the mine site level. This is where extraction happens on a daily basis, and it is where communities live. Since mining is a disruptive business, per definition, the question of who gets the benefit and who carries the environmental and social cost frequently leads to disputes or even conflicts. This is all well known to you, and we will not elaborate today on the many issues that cause conflict. And we will also not elaborate on why it is in the interest of companies to avoid the cost of conflict. What we will do in the next 90 minutes or so is that we introduce to you two new tools that assist stakeholders on the ground, communities, mining firms, local NGOs, and local governments. Two tools that support them to engage in a constructive dialogue with the goal to improve the development outcomes in mining areas. The basic idea behind both tools is to bring transparency to the mine site level. Such mine site level transparency, so understanding how mining affects local development, that's the next frontier in the transparency movement, and it is a prerequisite for a meaningful and an informed dialogue between stakeholders, between firms, communities, and local governments. We will use the first 40 minutes to present and introduce the tools, and after that we have quite some time for discussion and answering questions. The first tool that we present is the Resource Impact Dashboard, in short the RID, that we have developed at ETH over the last couple of years. It is a monitoring tool to monitor the development impact of mining over the entire life cycle of a mine. The second tool is the Mine Assessment Tool, the Msot. It is developed by the Responsible Mining Foundation as a response to frequent requests that they got from local stakeholders. The Msot facilitates stakeholder engagement with local actors in the driving seat. Both tools have two things in common. Both can be used by local actors independent from international organizations, and both are readily available and for free. Before we jump into the discussion and presentation of the tools, let me make 2 points on housekeeping and logistics. The first, we will be taking questions in written form throughout the event. If you want to send a question, please use the Q&A function of Zoom. You find the button at the bottom of the application if you are on a computer, and in the upper right corner if you're using a smartphone. And the second point, this webinar offers interpretation in French and Spanish. To select the language, click on the globe or planet icon and pick the language you want. Here again, the button is located at the bottom of the application. If you are on a computer, and in the upper right corner or in the More menu, if you are using a smartphone. With that, we start readily with the first tool that we want to discuss. I invite Felicitas Fischer and João Salavessa to introduce the Resource Impact Dashboard. Felicitas is a researcher at ETH, and João is an associate professor at Lurio in Nampula in northern Mozambique and has implemented the RID in 3 different mining sites. Felicitas, over to you.
Thank you. Let me quickly share my screen. So I hope everyone is able to see my screen right now. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce to you the Resource Impact Dashboard. The Resource Impact Dashboard is an online accessible tool to monitor local development impacts of mining. It has basically three main features, which I'm going to quickly show you. First, it encompasses a quite comprehensive view of development, meaning it has economic, social, environmental, and institutional development outcomes that it measures and monitors. Secondly, it triangulates data from different stakeholders. So that means basically that, first of all, companies insert their monitoring data on different things, for example, on local employment, as well as local procurement or tax payments, and also on their grievance mechanisms and on social investments they make. Then secondly, there is data from household surveys that are done with the communities living close to a mine. For example, there is data on income and well-being of those communities, but then also on the perception that those communities have towards the company and also towards local public institutions. And then thirdly, there is a data source that is just general institutional or official data, for example, on local service provision like education and health in the mining region. With that, the RID shows a balanced picture of local development impacts, taking into account all the three different stakeholders. By doing so, it establishes a common ground for resolving disagreements between communities and companies, and it contributes to a constructive dialogue and to evidence-based policymaking. And then thirdly, the RID also shows a long-term perspective of the development impacts. Ideally, it is updated every 2 years so that it can monitor impacts over the entire life cycle of a mine. It also has a standardized methodology and data visualization so that it provides comparable data over time and across countries. So it can be implemented in many different contexts. The RID has been tested in 4 different mine sites, 2 in Burkina Faso and 2 in Mozambique. And I am quickly going to show you some of the results from those 4 pilots. This is how the dashboard looks like. On the left-hand side, you can always see a satellite image of the mine. And then on the right, you see the data on the different categories which I mentioned before. For example, on well-being, on jobs, on health, etc. Now to some of the results. For example, on the environmental dimension, there is a question in the household survey on the environmental hazard perception of the communities living around the mine. So you have different hazards that are listed here, and then you have 2 questions. Basically, do you perceive a certain hazard? And then do you see the mine as the main cause for this hazard? Now, what the result is quite a nuanced picture. As you can see here, there is, for example, in this mine, a perception of quite a high perception of dust. However, not all of that is contributed to the mine. So the idea is really to show a balanced picture and not a black and white one. Also, the company can provide their monitoring data on environmental impacts. For example, they on water quality, how many samples they have taken, as well as how many samples were above the limit of their benchmarks. And they also report which benchmarks they have. On the left, you can see the geolocations of the samples taken. So basically, we have the company perspective here, as well as what we've seen before, the community perspective to the same topic. Under social capital, there is household survey data on the attitude of the communities towards the company. Data shows, for example, as we can see here, some perception of conflict. However, again, there is also a question on how they think the conflict is handled, which shows that actually that conflict handling is quite well answered here and perceived as quite well as the grievance mechanisms are trusted in general. So again, here, it's not a black and white thing. There's not only the question on conflict, but also on how the conflict handling is approved. Again, the company gets to also share their data on how many complaints they get, on which topics the complaints were, as well as how many of the complaints they were able to resolve through their monitoring systems, grievance mechanisms, sorry. What is shown here is that one issue around which conflict often arises is the issue of compensation. As you can see here, many people say they actually perceive, they lost property or assets. However, only very few report that they received compensation. Of course, this is their perspective, but we also know more often than not, it is not actually the actual amount of compensation that defines if there is conflict or not, but it is equally important to capture the satisfaction of the community with the compensation. So to get an idea of the potential of conflict, it is crucial to get this community perspective as well and their perception. In general, what is interesting is that even though less than half of the respondents in this particular example say that their life has actually improved after the mine entered this region, still the general overall support of mining is very high. In this example, it's nearly 80%. And actually that is something that we found in all the 4 different pilots. So again, here, it's a nuanced picture that the resource impact dashboard tries to show on the general attitude of people towards a company. What is way less well rated here is the actual interaction between the company and the community. As you can see here, did they receive information on certain topics, or were they consulted in general? As you can see here, quite poor outcome. On the different consultations and community interactions, also there is the company perspective again. So companies report how many meetings they had with authorities, with community representatives, or public meetings. But what we can see here very clearly as a result, as an outcome, is that there is a great missed potential, as those 2 last questions show. Those people that were consulted, namely, thought that the consultation was very useful and also very respectful, which is equally important. So basically, we can see a great missed potential here of this particular company. So we see that their consultation would have been a good thing, but they are still the exception here. Also, it's not only a question of how many quantitatively consultations that were made, but also qualitatively. So for example, are the community representatives here that the company says that it meets, are they really representative of the community or not? So this is what the resource impact dashboard is about. As we've seen, it's a platform to provide a balanced account of impacts and to show basically where there is a potential of conflict, and to give a basis for a constructive dialogue of the different stakeholders to discuss the local impacts of mining. I am going to share, or we are going to share with you a link that goes to a video on the website, which again explains the resource impact dashboard to you. And now we are going to talk about the application of the resource impact dashboard. And I'm happy to invite João Salavessa, who's professor at the University of Lurio and who led the implementation of the resource impact dashboard in Mozambique, to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicitas. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is João Salavessa. I'm based in Nampula, Mozambique, and I am professor at Lurio University. It is for me a great pleasure to participate in this webinar today and to have the opportunity to share our experience to set up the READ, particularly in its field implementation on practice in Mozambique. I thank you all in advance for your precious time and attention for this short presentation. Universidade Lurio is a public technical university established in 2006 and serving the northern provinces of Mozambique, with campus in Nampula, Niassa, and Cabo Delgado provinces. These three provinces share together around 30% of the country's population and are the less developed and the ones with the highest multidimensional poverty indexes, despite its agriculture and natural resources high potential. Investment initiatives from the previous decade to reduce the development gap and fastening the provincial economic growth still not perceived as benefits by the majority of the population and still expected to mature. Many projects are springing up in the country's northern regions due to the new resource industries. Investments as are in gas in the Rovuma Basin, gemstones in Montepuez, and graffiti in Balama, and heavy sands in Angoche, Lard, and Boba are examples of these new investments in resources that are growing in this part of the country. As in any mega project, the adequacy and acceptability of its local needs are reliant on effective community engagement, ranging from consultations and participatory decision-making, or instead can feed local sentiments of exclusion and disenfranchisement, fueling the conflicts. REIT implementation, taking part of the REIT implementation, joined with NADEL and Insuku in the research project measuring the development outcomes of resource extraction in producer countries, Lurio took the leading role in implementing the REIT. This means the interaction with the local government, companies, and the communities, meaning carrying out the household surveys in the surrounding mining sites to feed data for the REIT. Presently, 3 sites are under monitoring using the REIT methodology. 2 in Nampula province that scan my resources in Lard and Moma, and 1 in Angoche, that's Hayu mining. And in Cabo Delgado, we have worked with Sira Resources, that is a graffiti mine that is in Balama. The lessons learned and opportunities we have found during this implementation of the REIT in this region is that for each site, we need to contact previously the companies and the local governments. That's the first approach. And it is also important to do a scope visiting in the areas we are going to do the household survey, because many times things in the site are very different from what happens when we take a look in the satellite image. So in order to do a good planification, it is very important to go first in the site and understand how easy or not it will be to do the household survey. The acceptance and the interest for the REIT implementation from the local governments was unanimous in the 3 sites. And for this full government's acceptance, the fact that Lurio is a public local university and the active participation of our students in executing the household survey was an asset and a source of trust. Regarding the company's response and the engagement, it varied, dependent on the management's level and engagement with the best sustainable practices, as well as magnitude and intensity of the ongoing trouble issues on the operations. To start the REIT implementation as early as possible in the mine life cycle in a less trouble period will facilitate a better company's engagement and participation for sure. The trust, the public and regional statute of Lurio was helpful, bringing local government and communities engaging in participating for a soft REIT implementation. By employing Lurio students under the supervision of teachers as enumerators for the household survey field works, increased the level of acceptance by the families and turned it possible to communicate in local languages. 2 teams of 7 graduating students, supervised by 1 teacher each, collect with a mobile an average of 5 to 7 household surveys per an operator in an overall of 90 household surveys by day, around 600 per week. That was in average the requested representative sample size for each site. The interest of local governments was some evidence justified due to the desire for a better understanding the impact of the mine in the central government revenues and how the government reinvested it for the local development at the same time for appraisal of the satisfaction level of the communities. When in Balame, we were doing a household survey in the Graffiti Syrah Resources mine. Some localities belong already to the adjacent Montepuez district. And when we went in contact with the Montepuez district government to allow us to proceed with the field work, they get very excited with the RID and immediately asked us if it was possible to do it also in the ruby mining in Montepuez. The interest of the communities was mainly due to the general feeling that they were being listened and giving them the opportunity to express themselves about the mining operations. And this was more evident in the sites with more complaints from the population. In overall understanding, at the mining sites we worked, RID got a positive feedback as a simple to use and able to provide more clarity and availability of relevant information, feeding valuable data for all stakeholders there. That's of interest to implement RID, as I told before, in the early stages of the operations. And I've been wondering if it could be possible to use the RID in Cabo Delgado. How could we probably anticipate and avoid the ongoing conflict now there regarding the LNGA mega projects. Finally, I'm in the opinion that the RID methodology can also be interesting and useful for impact evaluation in other mega projects and impact infrastructures like dams, ports, railways, and highways. So, and this is our students team that performed the household surveys, and that's all for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, João and Felicitas, for sharing the idea behind the RID, how it works, and how it brings transparency to the Mindsight level to inform then also local deliberation, and how it integrates the view of the different stakeholders so that you do not have a fight over who is right and who is wrong, but you try to understand who is actually, or what are the different perspectives of on a given situation, which can be a valuable point to start discussions. So I'm sure this has provoked many questions and probably also ideas you want to share, or where you could yourself apply the RID. Please remember that you can post your questions and comments in the Q&A function of Zoom using the button at the bottom of the application on the computer, or in the upper right corner if you're using a smartphone. Before we discuss the question, let's turn now to the second tool, which is the Mindsight assessment tool. Pierre de Pasquale, he's the head of stakeholder engagement at the Responsible Mining Foundation. He will first briefly present the tool. Before then, Robert Ali Tanti, who is the director of the Center for Social Impact Studies in Ghana, will share the experience in applying the tool in mine sites in Ghana. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Fritz. And thanks everyone for being with us today. Let me share my screen. Right. I hope that everyone can see the screen now. And thank you, Felicitas and João. This is very, very inspiring. And I think what we're going to present now, the Mindsight assessment tool, is really a great complement to the work that you've done, or maybe the counterpart of this data gathering and sort of baseline study, gathering contextual information, trying to understand what's going on, because the Mindsight assessment tool is really an active and direct engagement tool. So what is it? The Mindsight assessment tool is a set of questions covering 15 key topics. Very simple questions, almost binary yes/no questions. It's free to use for everyone. We're using, there's no technical jargon or technical language. It's everyday language for everyone to use. It's easy to use, low on resource, low on budget. It's easy to print. I mean, we've made those printer-friendly versions. And it's available in multiple local languages. At the moment, it's already available in 14 local languages. So it looks like a very simple questionnaire with, like I said, simple yes/no questions covering a wide range of topics, including some environmental aspects around air quality, water, rehabilitation, tailings, some, let's say, social aspects, health and safety, social aspects for communities, safety, grievance mechanisms, emergency situation, and a number of questions around workers, their safety, their health, specific needs of women workers, prevention of harassment, training, living wage, local content, etc., etc. And why did we develop this Mindsight assessment tool? Well, the Responsible Mining Foundation, as an independent research organization, had been working for a number of years on assessing mining companies of different sizes on their economic, environmental, social, governance, performance, impacts, good practices. And we had consulted and engaged with a very wide range and network of stakeholders, particularly on the ground, at the local level, sharing and engaging with mining affected communities, mine workers, labor unions. And there were so many requests from particularly communities and workers for a tool like the Mindsight assessment tool, which would be very simple to use, could be driven, the engagement process could be driven by the local actors, the local stakeholders, low on resources, low on budget, and replicable pretty much everywhere. And really the objective was, what can we do as local stakeholders to enter into dialogue directly with the mining companies, the mining operators, on some of the matters that affect us at the mine site and around the mine sites, where we would not be dependent on external entities, external NGOs, the governments, external support, but really drive our own engagement. And especially for small-scale mining, really the Mindsight assessment tool can be used everywhere for mines of all sizes, but there was really a need to look at and address some of the most basic aspects of responsible mining at smaller mine sites. So we engage with a number of communities, trade unions, workers across a number of countries. Those ones were the main ones in the DRC, in Ghana, Indonesia, in the Kyrgyz Republic, Mongolia, Rwanda, South Africa. And the idea was really to help local stakeholders frame the tool, frame their expectations, find good and incisive entry points to be able to create a dialogue and enable the dialogue with the mining operators. But really from the beginning, it was thought and designed as a tool which would be designed by those local actors and for the local actors. So we were operating as a sort of a back technical support to make it the most meaningful and the most incisive and useful for mining affected communities and mine workers. So now how to use it, and clearly Robert will be able to share a lot more in terms of the practical use and the implementation. But for communities and mine workers, it is a tool that can be very helpful to raise awareness. So within the community, within the workforce, and also in the discussion with the different actors, whether government authorities or the mining operators. It's definitely a tool to start a constructive dialogue. So set a number of commonalities in the dialogue, or set a common ground of expectations and issues that should be addressed. It's very helpful to identify gaps across those 15 topics, but not limited to, of course. This is an approach that can be expanded to other topics. And it also allows the measurement of improvement over time by comparing the response, and not so much the yes or no, but what's behind the yes or no answers. And also in a number of cases, some community groups, civil society network have used the Mindsight assessment tool to compare different sites. And ultimately, this is all meant and designed to prevent harm at the local level and to build trust between the different stakeholders. And similarly for mining operators and even smaller mining cooperative, artisanal structures, it can be helpful to self-assess the Mindsight performance against those basic aspects of responsible mining. Similarly, it can be used to identify the gaps, highlight the gaps, and measure improvement, and also help formalize responsible practices at the Mindsight level. We have been approached by spontaneously by some mining companies, often smaller mining companies, who are in this process of formalizing their stakeholder engagement, formalizing their practices towards collaborative decision-making, local employment, local procurement. And we're very, very happy to use this set of simple questions to formalize our practices. And again, this is a way of building a constructive engagement with local communities, mine workers, to ultimately prevent harm and build trust. But like I said in the beginning, it really is a great complement to the work of NADEL and the resource impact dashboard, because where they provide the baseline to build the constructive dialogue and to understand the context, exposure to risks, potential conflicts, the Mindsight assessment tool on its part is a tool that can be used for the next step, which is actually engaging and building upon this baseline situation to address the different issues. So thanks for your attention. And now I will let my colleague Robert take over. I just wanted to share with you now a map of Ghana, because Robert and the Center for Social Impact Studies have been using the Mindsight assessment tool in 4 different mining communities, 4 mining regions here in Ghana. And he will say a lot more, especially about what happened at the Manso Aponapono, Iron Furi, and the Tongo mining areas. So thank you again, and Robert, the floor is yours now.
Good afternoon to you all. I bring you warm greetings from Ghana and from the Center for Social Impact Studies. As my colleague said, I will be sharing our experiences in using the Mindsight assessment tool in 3 communities in Ghana. I will be sharing experiences from Msot Apnapono in the Ashanti region, Ayamfre in the western region of Ghana, and then Tongo in the northern parts of Ghana. Let me start with a brief introduction of the Center for Social Impact Studies. The Center for Social Impact Studies was formed in January 2001 with the sole aim of becoming a research backbone for Ghana's extractive sector. We are based in Obuasi, the ancient mining city in Ghana. Over the years, CESIS has served as the mouthpiece for most communities affected by the operations of mines. Now, what is the approach? Our approach in using the Mindsight assessment tool. Our approach has been using the Mindsight assessment tool to build the capacity of the locals, especially women, so that they can champion their own advocacy. What we do is we use the tool to build their capacity, and then they will lead advocacy. They lead their own engagement with the mining companies, the regulatory bodies, and the local government authorities. Let me share experience from Msot Apnapono. This is a community located 60 kilometers northwest of Obuasi, the ancient mining company in the Ashanti region of Ghana. Msot Apnapono lies within the Aprapram forest, which used to be one of the forest reserves in Ghana. The entire Msot traditional area is rich in gold deposit, and as a result, there are a lot of illegal mining going on in the area. The residents of this community are about 2,500, and most of them are farmers. They mainly produce cocoa, coffee, and food crops. Unemployment in Msot Apnapono is very high, especially among the youth. And as a result, most of them are engaged in illegal mining. CESIS, as part of its sensitization, using the Mindsight assessment to sensitize local communities affected by mines or mining affected communities, had a workshop in the community. The workshop was attended by 30 community members. And as part of our policy, at every of our meetings, 40% of participants are women. So, and when women attend our meetings, we make conscious effort for them to, they don't just come and sit down and participate, but we make conscious effort for them to voice out and encourage them to come out with their issues. We took the thematic areas in the Mindsight assessment tool and had a discussion with the community. In addition, we also introduced to them the Ghana's Mining and Minerals Act, Act 703, and also introduced them to some of the regulatory bodies and their mandates, including the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Minerals Commission. What are the key issues after we administered the Mindsight assessment? What are the key issues that came up? We realized that there were very limited engagement between the mining company and the community. Community members complain of destruction of their farmlands without payment of adequate compensation. There were pollution of water bodies, dust by vehicles belonging to the company, and the company had refused to periodically water the dust to suppress, water the road to suppress the dust. Refusal of the company to employ the locals. These were, I think this was even the first issue that we discussed. Then there were issues of abandoned pits on people's mind, which led to some people falling into such pits and dying. Even though some of the issues were outside the Mindsight assessment tool, CESIS decided to assist the community to get redress for their grievances. These are some of the interventions. We guided the community to write a petition to Ghana's Minerals Commission and to the Environmental Protection Agency of Ghana. We facilitated the process, but we built the capacity of the locals to lead in the petition, in the presentation of the petition. Following receipt of a copy of the petition, the district chief executive of the area, who is the highest local politician representing the president, called for an emergency meeting between the community to have a discussion on the issues that they raised in the petition. Fortunately, the member of parliament also showed interest in the issue and then also called for a meeting between the community and the company. It is important to note that this was the first time that local authorities held a meeting with the community to address their issues. So it is important to, let me emphasize that these meetings came up after we administered the Mindsight assessment tool. We engaged the community on it. The community members were asked to present their petition to the Security Council at the regional level. The local chief of the area also took interest and met the community. In the end, a joint committee was formed to look at the issues and address them. As I do this presentation today, most of the issues, especially issues with the abandoned pits, the abandoned pits are being covered. The road, they are taking good care of it. And issues of compensations, they have begun looking at compensations, and I'm told that by the middle of this month, those who are supposed to receive compensation will be attended to. Environmental issues in the community, issues of air quality and water quality are being addressed as a result of the petition that the community presented in Msot. Let me take you to Ayamfre. Ayamfre is also a mining community. It is located about 43 kilometers west of Obuasi, the ancient mining town. Ayamfre is a commercial town. We engaged the Ayamfre community on the Mindsight assessment tool. We brought together the youth, women, and the assembly member and had a sensitization on the tool. At Ayamfre, issues of, let me also say that at Ayamfre, we were fortunate to have workers of the mining company participating in our meeting. The issues that came up from Ayamfre were refusal of the company to employ the locals. The locals alleged that most employers of the mining company are from outside their area. And so they didn't also know about any local content policy of the company. The workers of the mine raised issues about low levels of salary. Then the workers also raised issues about non-transparency in salary negotiation. There was also a major concern about the quality of air and water in the area. In fact, the community didn't know that the mining company was supposed to announce to them the quality of air and water periodically. Following our sensitization, the assembly member who was part of the group constituted a committee to engage the chief. They have had 2 successful meetings out of the committee that was constituted. They have had 2 successful meetings with the mining company, and most of the issues have been addressed. My last conversation with the assembly member showed that the issue of air quality and water quality are on top of the issues that the mining company has accepted to look at. The local communities members, especially the youth, also raised issue on employment, which they presented to the company. The mining company is trying to go underground, and so there's an agreement by the company and the community to train some locals to build their capacity to have direct employment when they start the underground operation. Let me share our experience from our last community, which is Tongo in the Upper East region of Ghana. Tongo is a small town near the Upper East regional capital, Brugger. And the area is rich in gold. And so a lot of the young people over there are engaged in illegal mining. The community also houses a large-scale mining company. So we engaged them. We did a step-by-step discussion of the thematic areas in the Mindsight assessment tool. And these were issues that were raised. No clear information on local content policy from the mine. The locals are not employed. Workers and managers of the mine do all their shopping outside the local. They travel to the regional capital to do their shopping. The community is not aware of any local content policy of the mines of the mining company. And they also had issues with abandoned pits. And then the issue of poor relationship between the community and the mining company. Like I said from the beginning, our goal is to build the capacity of the communities to do constructive engagement with the companies. So as I speak, we are based on the issues that we receive from the community. We visited the mining company and shared a copy of the Mindsight assessment tool with them. And we are in the process of building the capacity of some local members in Tongo to engage the community, the mining company, and the regulatory bodies constructively. Let me conclude that in all the communities, the example for Msot Apunapuno is shining. And it shows that the Mindsight assessment tool can be used to build the capacity of marginalized people to voice out and also to engage authorities and to find better solutions to improve their lives. A focus on the Mindsight assessment tool can enable and build the confidence of the locals to drive their own advocacy, as I stated earlier. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I will end here and take questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert, and also Pierre, for your presentation of the tool and the very interesting experiences that you made in Ghana, Robert, in 3 different mining sites, and what you have been able to achieve with that. As we move now to the question and answer sessions, and remember the Q&A function is still open and active, so you can still post questions. As we move to discussion, I invite the panelists to turn on their camera so that we can have a panel discussion. And I suggest that we start with questions that came up right for the last presentation for the mine assessment tool. Here, you nicely have shown, Robert, that capacity building is actually a key element of what you are doing. So, and it's, what I understand, it's about building capacity regarding the use of the assessment tool, but also capacity to engage with government agencies and with mining companies. So the question that was raised here by Edward is taking a company perspective, whether this tool also helps you to engage with what is called kind of illegal miners. So you are focusing very much on the perspective and the relationship between mining communities and the mining companies. Company perspective is also, well, there are also illegal miners on our concession. And the question that was raised, how does your Mindsight assessment tool help you actually to engage with this question as well?
Okay, thank you very much. Like I mentioned in my presentation, the engagement looks at the regulatory bodies. When we go to the community, aside the Mindsight assessment tool, we also introduce them to Ghana's mining policies, like the Mining and Minerals Act. And we also introduce them to the functions of the EPA and the Minerals Commission, which are the regulatory bodies when it comes to mining in Ghana. So if there's an illegal miner in the community who is causing maybe damage to the environment, quickly we build their capacity to engage based on the policies and the law to engage the Minerals Commission. Because before you mine, you need a license. So if you don't have license, you have no right to engage in any mining in any area in the country. So we build their capacity based on the functions of the EPA, based on the Minerals and Mining Act laws. So based on that law, they are able to report such illegal miners to the appropriate authority for them to take action. We teach them basic things like writing a petition and then engaging them constructively, like I said.
And if I can add something here, Robert and Fritz, really the Mindsight assessment tool should not be a substitute to a government trying to either formalize or support or assist any miners, whether they're legal or illegal miners on the concession. It can help identify some of the critical issues, but you need an interlocutors to start the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Pierre and Robert. Another question that came up and that actually addresses both tools is the question: to what extent could actually both tools help companies with their corporate reporting schemes? So feed into the GRI reporting, for example, or all sustainability reporting initiatives. Pierre, what are your views and experiences on that?
Yes, no, for sure. I think that's a great question. And at the Responsible Mining Foundation, I think we have a view on both aspects, because we also look at how companies at the corporate level report and share information and disclose information on ESG issues. I think here in all the work we've always seen a high disconnect, at least a strong contrast between information that is available at the corporate level. So you have the policies in place, the management standards, the procedures, the templates, the performance tracking. But when you look at the Mindsight level, the asset level, disclosure of information, data sharing, evidence of engagement, there's a huge lack of information. So we think the Mindsight assessment tool, even if the questions may look simpler or less complex than some of the GRI or international reporting standards, they can really help ensure that the corporate level policies and practices are being disseminated and translated into site level actions. And I think this is why already now a number of mining companies have approached RMF and said, well, this is great. This is the kind of tool we need to formalize, translate, and make sure that we don't only share data, but also engage in a collaborative decision-making process with our stakeholders.
Thanks, Pierre. Yeah, and just for adding for the perspective of the RID, actually, this was one of the motivations to start the development, that we see that GRI and many of the other reporting standards very much focus at the aggregate level, but actually provide quite little information at the Mindsight level. There it's mainly anecdotal, but not systematic. And I think this is, for the reporting, would be kind of also a enrichment for the reporting and make things much more relevant. Just to take GRI water reporting as an example, reporting water at the aggregate level is of, not the same use as when you have kind of the disaggregated use, because the water issues are always very local. So that would actually also take mining company reporting to a next level. So then let's move to a next question. And I would like to address that to João. It was asked about, you mentioned, João, that people, that it helps to build trust when students and people from the region visit households for doing the household surveys. And Peter, asking the question, wonders whether there is any feedback on the levels of trust from participants during household survey, whether there is any experience in terms of, that you have them, people feel free also and confident to give kind of honest opinions, or whether this is kind of in a difficult situation and you have the impression that it's like a social desirability bias, that people do not have the courage to give honest opinions.
Yes, that's a very good question. And from our experience working with the students in these household surveys for the REIT, as in other works we have already done, when we work with students, the communities really engage better with them because they are close, and sometimes some of the students are from that locals. They are also from the mine zone, and it helps a lot to people to trust. And once we are a university and we are not a consultant, they open talk about what we are asking them. And the best appraisal I can do is that when we have trust issues in the field, they are really very, very visible. You know, if something goes wrong, it really goes wrong. So what I can really tell you is that if we can get to the end with the survey, that's for sure, because everything went fine and the community is engaged and trust the students, and that's my point. But I don't have a comparison about other households done by consulting services, for instance, or hours done by the university with the students. But from my practice, I trust the results are good. That's my point.
Maybe I can jump in here, since I'm also aware of what we did in Burkina Faso, the other country where we had 2 pilots. And there it was actually a consultancy firm who did the household surveys. It was IFSRA, and so the Institute for Social Research in Africa. And what is key here, I think, is not necessarily what the institution is, but that the institution is seen as impartial and not having a hidden agenda, and that depends very much on the contexts. Sometimes it's better if it's a state organization, like, for example, the state university, as in the example of Mozambique. But then obviously also consultancies can have this this image of being impartial and not having a hidden agenda. Yes, or for example, think tanks can have this, NGOs, etc. So really it can be implemented by a variety of organizations, but this is a very crucial point, that it's seen as impartial.
Absolutely. And well, 2 points that help actually also to make sure that this is a balanced view. One is the sample size that's always calculated in a way that is representative. And the second, when you do quality checks on household survey, you look at the spread of answers. So, and you see in all surveys that we did quite a broad spread of answers. So they're not kind of confined to kind of like a streamlined position, which also indicates that there is diversity and variation within that. Yeah, there is another question also addressed to the RID, and Felicitas, you can probably say something to that. Got a number of questions asked, where can you actually apply that? Can you also apply that in Quito, in Ecuador, in Kyrgyzstan? Can you apply it to exploration situations or to mine closure situations? So all these varieties, is that something where the RID fits, or is that beyond its capabilities?
Yes, I've seen these questions and I answered some of them directly. Sorry if I didn't have time to answer everything, but yes, definitely, that's the idea. So the resource impact dashboard is really a tool designed that it is able to cover the whole life cycle of a mine. So ideally, obviously, we can start already at the exploration level. And then follow it through the whole process, like construction of the mine, then the actual, extraction and processing, as well as then the closure of the mine. But it can be implemented for any stage, basically. And yes, as I mentioned as well in my presentation, it can be implemented in many different contexts, since the questionnaires and also just the whole design of the methodology, as well as the visualization of the data, is standardized. So it's actually quite comparable to the results and data we get across many different regions. So definitely it can be used in different contexts, and it can be also used in for any stage a current mine is in at the moment. There was also a question if it can be used for oil and gas operations. And yes, the answer here again is yes, because there is often a lot of similar impacts of those operations. Obviously, this might be slightly different for offshore gas and oil operations. However, also often there is onshore facilities and processing plants, etc. So, and those have the same kind of externalities that also mines have, or onshore operations. So for basically any industrial big resource extraction project, the RID can definitely be implemented.
How does that look for the mine assessment tool, Pierre and Robert? Is that also possible to use it during exploration, for example?
Yes, we have one practical example of an NGO in Tanzania who reached out to us because they were struggling with a project of a coal mine and had difficulties being heard by the local authorities and government. And again, not saying that the Mindsight assessment tool is the solution and will help you solve all problems, but it was helpful in understanding what the future impacts could be, or what a reasonable set of expectations could be in the first place, and also framing and formulating the expectations towards the government and the authorities, and say and ask whether the developing companies, or the prospecting companies, or the exploration companies was able to demonstrate that these issues would be taken into account and addressed during the life of the project. This is how it could be used. And also we've been in contact with a global federation of trade unions, where there's a reflection around expanding the same, or using the same approach, same concept of simple questions, capacity building at the local level for other industrial sectors, and not only mining or oil and gas, but really could be used in any sector, this kind of approach and methodology.
And how does it look with feedback from different continents and geographical regions that you have with the Mindsight assessment tool? Do you see noticeable differences? Because that was also one of the questions, that it can be used reasonably in different contexts.
Well, I think this is what's probably the most striking part. And that was really striking when we developed and designed the tool in collaboration with local stakeholders, that even though those 15 topics are by no means comprehensive, they really reflect or articulate the key concerns and the key issue that you will find across the planet on every continent, in every context, whether this is bauxite, iron ore, gemstone, those issues of local employment, water quality, emergency situations, working conditions are always so prominent. And of course, there's still so many negative impacts and harm happening. And I think this is why we all here, we haven't solved the responsible mining puzzle yet. But yes, there are very strong correlations and similarities from one country to another. It's quite surprising. I don't know, Robert, maybe even between mine sites, you've seen the kind of similarities.
We cannot hear you, Robert. It still doesn't work. You can.
Can you hear me?
Now it's good.
All right. Okay. So the issue of employment, air quality, and water quality cut across almost all the communities that we have visited. So these are the three major issues. And there are other issues that they normally raise, which is also, even though not part of the assessment, to the issue of compensation. So these are the issues that cut across almost all the communities that we have done the sensitization.
So far, larger commonality in issues and challenges, independent of geographical regions within a country and globally, which makes actually the same methodologies useful in different places. That also leads to the next question, kind of, which is, what do we do with the data that we collect? Are they publicly available? Felicitas.
Yes, so the resource impact dashboard is publicly available under the link, I think that was shared earlier in the chat. And you can see there and browse through the different mine sites, and you can see all the different variables.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free to use, exactly. So it's free to use also if you're interested in implementing it in a new mine site, for example. You find all the contact details online on that platform, on that website. And yeah, you feel free to also think about an application in your countries.
We will come to this question of what to do when you want to apply it in a moment. But before that, Robert and Pierre, what about sharing of the Mindsight assessments using the Msot tool? Are these private data only for the local communities, or are they shared publicly?
Okay, so for us, we share it with every community member. When we visit communities, we print copies and we share with them. Fortunately for us, we have one in our local language, the popular language in Ghana, which is Twi. We have a copy in it, so we share with them. It is not private. Anyone can walk into our office and grab a copy. So it is a public document. We share with communities, we share with mining companies, and we share with all stakeholders.
Yeah, and when we started the project, the intent was not for RMF to collect and centralize all the data back. It was really to develop a practical tool that any community, any worker group or trade union could use. So this is why we've built this long list of local languages. But it's true that, I mean, we've seen it in Ghana. I think Robert said how Msot Aponapono became, sort of a living example of what's possible, what can be achieved. So there's really a potential source of inspiration for all communities around the world. And I mean, it's fascinating. We keep hearing every 2 weeks, every month, someone contact us and say, well, great, thank you. We've been using the Mindsight assessment tool in our local context. It's been very helpful. So we have not designed it in a way where we could centralize the information and compare it, but this is potentially a new world of, sort of benchmarking, comparing. What we're going to do is ourselves apply the same questions in our next RMI report. So we'll be assessing 250 Mindsights against those 15 topics. But obviously this is desk-based research. It's not the same work as what Robert and Cesis have been doing.
Which is great to see a new data source coming up from the Mindsight assessment tool across a large number of Mindsights with in-depth studies in particular application, and from the RID, a database that is building up as well and providing many new data and information. There is a related question about confidentiality. And probably, João, you could talk a bit about confidentiality in the household survey and how we do that with kind of informed consent and these questions, because that's an honest or relevant concern about confidentiality.
Yes, sure. It was something we care about when we do our household surveys. We always first of all read the consent, the term of consent for to inform the community about the confidentiality, and that they are always free to quit at any moment from the questions that are being done to them. So that's very important, and in order that people get comfortable and can answer freely to the questions that are being done. There was another question I was trying to answer, but I'm not very experimented with this, and I lost. It was about if it is very hard to do the household surveys, and in my opinion, the household surveys is probably the best approach, and what brings the read the most valuable data and information, because it's an opportunity to listen to everybody. Many times there are consultations that are provided by the companies, but sometimes people told us that the people that are invited to go into their consultations are not so many, and sometimes there are also bias in the selection of those representatives of the community. So the household survey, I trust, is really important, and it's what makes the difference. And if it can be hard the first time, we have repeated in some sites. So we have done a first wave, and then we have done a second wave, and the second time it's much easier. So I think it's just a point to plan it and to implement it, and it is not so hard. It has some costs, but it's something we need to plan also and get the funds. And I once told that if I was managing a company, a mining company, I would be interested in getting this information, because I think it's very, very useful, and it can give me information that I can use for a better management of the company. So that's my point. I think the household survey is really important, and it's what makes the difference, on my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, just to to add 2 points here on the value of the household survey. I think it's for one mining company that was actually the driver to participate, because the person was actually keen on understanding what a representative view in the area looked like. And it also allows to start collecting data still when a company is reluctant and not sure whether it wants to share environmental data or local procurement data, and then slowly can kind of see what the value is and participate. And just to come back on the confidentiality issue, João made an important point that it's an informed consent that people give, and as soon as the interview is done and uploaded, data are anonymized. So it's taking care of that. Privacy is really kind of respected throughout the process. I think that's very important. Now, since we are moving ahead with time, I want to touch on 2 things. One is briefly look into ideas that take both tools a bit further. There are questions regarding both tools, asking to what extent do these tools help us with supply chain traceability? That's a whole other dimension that takes it much more closer to the consumer, of course. When you are interested in procurement of electronics or other minerals, how can the Mindsight assessment tool and the RID help here? Pierre, do you give it a try?
Yes, no, for sure. Thanks, Fritz, and thanks for, I think it's Peter who asked the question. It's a very good question, and we have been in contact, and actually more and more, with the downstream customers of the mines, the value chain, the supply chain. And I think not so much regarding the traceability, but for the whole due diligence process. And we know how, it's becoming more and more important to the downstream customers, whether they are car manufacturers, jewelers, technology companies. And for many years, I think those companies would rely on rating agencies or sort of prepared data sets, but more and more they're doing either their own engagement, their own due diligence process, or they try to expand the range of data sources and information they collect. And so in this case, the Mindsight assessment tool is just a great tool if you want to frame this, again, Mindsight level, asset level, ESG performance, collaborative engagement with stakeholders. The way we've been using it, and the way, Robert and others have been using it, is for the communities or the workers to engage and ask the questions. But if you're within the value chain, you could potentially also complement this by yourself asking the questions to the companies and bringing the two together, comparing and having a more, we think, comprehensive and an honest picture of what's going on, and being closer to the reality on the ground. So any downstream customers could use it for its engagement process, asking the right questions, understanding what's going on, and building the relationship with their the mine sites where they procure the goods. That's one way.
Yeah,
it's interesting. It's interesting, Pierre, what you say, and I would very much subscribe to that as well from the side of the RID. I think, as also with the Msot tool, the RID focuses on the local level. So basically on that step of the value chain, and rather than and helping to inform this part and with that also helping to inform traceability and due diligence issues maybe for a specific mine. What the RID does include is questions on local procurement, for example, which is basically the other side, upstream even more than downstream. And it has, as I said, it has many different variables that are just generally looking at the production at the mine site, which can be very informative for downstream customers to to use, and a very important tool as well for the companies themselves to elaborate where they stand, and to be able to also communicate to downstream customers, the perception of their mine, but also their monitorings on the local level. So very similar here, I think.
Thank you both for that. So I want to just mention one comment that was actually made by Jacob. He says that, well, the discussion centered very much around mining communities and mining companies, but there is also, the Msot has uncovered issues around governance that needs government action and government relationship. I do not want to into a discussion of that, but just emphasize, that's a very important dimension. That is kind of like a triangular relationship between mining communities, companies, and local governments. And it's important that we understand this dynamic as a triangular dynamic, and both tools address actually both dimensions. Now, let's just move to the last topic, and that's about how to proceed when you want to apply one of the tools. And that involves question of what does it actually cost? We say it's free, but of course, in the end, when you go out, train people, that also has a cost. That's one aspect. And the other aspect is, how to proceed very practically. Probably João and Robert, you can briefly talk about kind of local costs, what you have to cover for household surveys or capacity building, and how do you actually cover that? And then Pierre and Felicitas can address more general, how do you proceed? Robert, do you want to start?
Yes. Of course, they're going to these communities to build their capacity, and engaging them comes with a cost. We are able to do local mobilization, and we also receive support from Responsible Mining Foundation in doing that. But we've realized that we need to scale up and reach a lot of communities. So all I would say is that we'll call for support from anywhere, because we need to engage them to understand the issues around them, so they can do the constructive engagement.
So it's about covering kind of the local cost for local outreach. Yeah. João.
So regarding our experience, so we were part of we have that grant from the Research for Development Fund, and then we use that amount to cover the travel costs and the costs of staying of our students during the field work. So that was the costs we have to cover, and for sure during the training we provided, we also create some better conditions than usually in order to motivate the students to engage them, and so they can feel fine in do that task. And it was the cost we had. Once we have now we don't have no more fundings from the grant, so to continue it with the household surveys, especially with that's the main cost of implementing READ, to collect the data from the government and to collect data from the companies doesn't cost so much. But for the household surveys, I want to believe that if companies really engage in the READ implementation, it will be a small cost for them regarding the turnover of the investment in the household survey. So I think maybe we need to contact that companies and show them the results and engage them so they can fund the next household surveys and to feed data for the READ. That's my point.
So for both projects, the costs that accrue are actually at the local level, not for the tool itself. Technical assistance provided, but it's just kind of the facilitation on the ground. Felicitas, how to proceed when you want to deploy the RID?
Yes, so maybe just as a small add-on to what João just said, exactly. So there is basically just the cost of handling the project, you know, of contacting the different stakeholders, and then of carrying out the household survey. That are the costs that have to be carried. Everything else is for free. Now, how to initiate the process? First, maybe who can initiate the process? Everyone, actually. So it doesn't matter if you're from a local NGO or from another civil society organization, from a university, or even if you're from a company or from a ministry. Initiating the process is very easy. Everyone can do it. The only thing that has to be done is basically to think about how to implement the project, and then also so exactly which Mindsight, for example, how to contact the different stakeholders, and then to kickstart basically the whole thing, the whole implementation. It is necessary just to contact the RID support. And there is an email address on the contact site of the actual website, so that then the RID support can create an account for this institution that can implement it in a certain country. It can also be, several institutions in a country implementing it for different Mindsights. So basically, you don't need to be the only implementer in, let's say, Ghana, for example, but that there can be a CSR, a civil society organization implementing one Mindsight, but then a university that has a project on a different Mindsight and wants to implement it in that region and do the job of coordinating, basically contacting the different stakeholders, for example, the mine, if they want to join, but also finding a funding maybe individually for the university. So it can be several stakeholders implementing it in different countries.
Thank you very much, Felicitas. So quite low key to start engaging with it. Pierre?
Yes, I think similarly to what Felicitas said, the Mindsight assessment tool was designed as a turnkey engagement tool, and anyone can use it. I'm just sharing the link now in the chat. It's available, like I said, in 14 different languages. We keep adding more languages as organizations send new translations to us. But maybe one thing, and I'm conscious of time, but I think an issue that would maybe require another webinar, another meeting, is sometimes the difficulties, even for mining companies, to set up those engagement space, because for local communities to come and attend workshops and engagement sessions and meetings, it has a cost, because in many cases, you need to take a day off or leave your farm, and then you're not making money that day where you're going to the workshop. So how do you address this? It could fall into the bribery and corruption limits of a mining company protocols and operations. This is where I think third-party facilitating organizations are very critical and can be very important. So in our case, or in the case of CSIS, this is where an independent NGO can help facilitate the process, do the capacity building. But I hope that, as there's this growing interest among downstream actors, or even banks or capital providers or governments, that they could play this role of facilitating the engagement on the basis of the MSATs, and clearly combining with the RID methodology. Thanks.
Thanks, Pierre, also for the suggestion of a follow-up webinar, where we also can then discuss experiences that you actually made when you take that forward. Now, let's come to close this event, and I want to do that with inviting the panelists to briefly share in one or two sentences, like, what is for you the one most important thing to make the use of the tool, be it the Mindsight assessment tool or the RID, a success? What do you think is most important, Robert?
Okay, for me, I think to make it a success, we need to deliberately involve the marginalized and the vulnerable in our capacity building, and especially women and young people, because when you go to the communities, these two groups are the most affected, who are mostly affected by the negative impact. So when we engage these people and they understand the issues and they are able to engage, we'll get the needed results.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert. Focusing on the vulnerable women and youth. João, in your experience and view, what is the most important thing to make the RID on the ground a success?
The most important thing, I think there are three important things because we work with companies, we work with the communities, and we work with the government. So to have success, we need to engage them all, and that's the point. Of course, the household survey is quite nice and important data, but if companies fail or the government also doesn't provide the data we need, it also fails. So after all, I think we need to engage all the points in that triangle on board of the read. Otherwise, it will be not complete, and the results will not be so good.
Yeah, thank you. Engaging with all stakeholders, Pierre.
In 2 sentences, I think you need to be flexible and don't see any tool, whether the MSAT or the RID, as an end by itself or the ultimate solution, but as a means and one of the many tools in your toolbox. And you need to show and convince the users that it aligns with their priorities and their concern, and that they're doing it for their own good and their own, just exercising their own agency and civic right, and that it aligns with their needs and concerns. You're not forcing anyone to use them.
The intrinsic motivation to really engage. Felicitas.
Yes, I would like to add on the last two points, or actually on all 3 points, that it is actually to bring everyone aboard. It's crucial to convince all the different stakeholders that in the example of the RID, by providing their data and participating, they actually have the possibility to contribute their view and their data, and to bring that also to the table and make it visible for all the others, so that they have the opportunity to make sure their view is properly represented. Like a company can, for example, report on how many people they employ, and there's no kind of, I don't know, second guessing about on rumors. So basically, to avoid rumors and false information, it is crucial to have these 3 perspectives and to make the participants and stakeholders aware that it's in their interest and to provide their view, so that we have everything on one table and can start constructive discussions.
So then, thank you very much, Felicitas. Let me add one last point in addition to the inclusion of the different stakeholders, bring everybody on board, and the different perspectives. I think it's important for both tools the same way that you engage with it with a kind of a longer term perspective, starting with the Mindsight assessment. The first time gives you like a snapshot where you are now, makes you understand what the situation is today, the same for the RID. But it becomes particularly interesting when you do it in 2 years again and see how things change. And you can start sharing actually success, that you see things improve and other areas still need attention. So I think these are kind of a couple of things to keep in mind. With that, I would like to thank you for participating in today's webinar. Thanks for your time and sorry for 6 minutes overtime. I hope you enjoyed to learn about new tools and take some inspiration with you. Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.